She was 6 days into one of the most grueling hikes on planet Earth, barely even started, when her body decided it had a different plan. 2,190 miles of trail stretched out in front of her. The Appalachian Trail. The kind of challenge that breaks people who have trained for years, who have every piece of gear dialed in, who have spent months mentally preparing for what's ahead. And here, on day 6, Kelly Hayes woke up in the middle of the night on the forest floor, with a pain in her abdomen so severe she could barely breathe. Most people in that situation would have called someone, gotten off the trail, and never looked back. Most people would have said they tried. This wasn't most people. What happened that night, and what Kelly did next, is a story that most of her fans have never fully heard. Because the version of Kelly Hayes that shows up in the thumbnails and the trail vlogs and the van life highlights, that version cost a lot more than it looks. This is the untold story. Conway, Arkansas isn't exactly the first place that comes to mind when you picture a future YouTube star hiking tens of thousands of miles across the American wilderness. It's a mid-sized city in the heart of central Arkansas, and for Kelly Joy Hayes, it was home for almost her entire life growing up. From the very beginning, Kelly was an athlete, not in a casual recreational sense, in an all-consuming, identity-defining sense. She was playing City League basketball by 1st grade, and was in year-round programs by 5th grade. Conway Christian School, where Kelly attended from grade school through high school, became the arena for what would be one of her early defining achievements, a basketball state championship her junior year. That win wasn't just a trophy. For a kid who had built her entire world around the sport, it was confirmation that she was on the right path. Basketball wasn't something she did, it was who she was. She took that identity into college, earning a spot on the women's basketball team at the University of Central Arkansas, a mid-major Division I program. That's not a small deal. Division I athletics at any level demands elite commitment, early mornings, late nights, and the kind of sacrifice most people never have to make in their lives. But college sports are unforgiving, and for Kelly, it ended the way it ends for a lot of talented athletes. Not on her own terms. A knee injury crept in, refused to heal properly, and slowly dismantled everything she had built. She would describe the moment she finally had to let basketball go as one of the hardest things she has ever done in her entire life. Not one of the hardest athletic things. One of the hardest things, period. Full stop. So what do you do when the thing you built your whole life around gets taken from you? When the identity you wore for 15 years just disappears? For Kelly Hayes, the answer would take years to figure out. But first, she was going to get a lot of degrees. While a lot of people in Kelly's position might have drifted, she threw herself into academics with the same intensity she had once given to basketball. By the time she was done at the University of Central Arkansas, she had accumulated a degree in journalism, a minor in marketing, a second bachelor's degree in nutrition, and a master's degree in the science of nutrition. That's 4 qualifications from the same university while simultaneously being a college athlete. She went on to work as a registered dietitian and certified personal trainer. On paper, it looked like a life coming together exactly as planned. The professional path was set. The credentials were stacked. The 9-to-5 future was taking shape. And Kelly absolutely did not want it. In her own words, she has never desired a traditional life. She wasn't chasing the script that most people follow. College, career, house, marriage, the whole checklist. Something in her was wired differently. The competitive drive that used to live on the basketball court was still there. It still needed somewhere to go. She just hadn't found the right channel for it yet. That channel came from the internet, in the form of a woman named Dixie, who runs a YouTube channel called Homemade Wanderlust. Dixie's videos introduced Kelly to the concept of long-distance trail hiking, specifically the Appalachian Trail, and something immediately clicked. Kelly had grown up in Arkansas, surrounded by nature, with parents who took her hiking as a kid. She had always loved the outdoors. But this was different. This wasn't a day hike. This was 2,000 miles of wilderness, self-reliance, and pure physical and mental endurance. For someone who had just lost the most demanding physical challenge of her life, this sounded like a replacement. A new mountain to climb, literally. The decision didn't take long. Kelly was going to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail. She launched her YouTube channel on January 3, 2020, and began documenting her preparation and early outdoor adventures. She built her audience, she trained, she planned. And in April 2021, she set foot on the trail in Dawsonville, Georgia, at 28 years old, with a converted Sprinter van waiting for her at the end of the journey. She made it 6 days before everything nearly fell apart. Day 6, still in Georgia, barely a scratch on 2,190 miles. Kelly woke up in the early hours to a pain in her lower left abdomen. Sharp. Wrong. Not the kind of sore muscles you expect on a through hike. Something else entirely. Her first instinct was to push through it, chalk it up to trail life, keep moving. But the pain kept building. It wasn't going away. By the time she acknowledged it was serious, she was deep in the forest with no road access for miles. She was with 2 other hikers, people she had known for exactly 3 days. Trail friends she'd met on the path, barely acquaintances, and yet when things went sideways, those 2 women didn't hesitate. Kelly hiked 4.5 miles through worsening pain to reach the nearest road. 4.5 miles. People have been evacuated from trails in better shape than that. She got to the road, was picked up, and was driven to the nearest hospital emergency room. The diagnosis came after multiple tests and several hours in the ER. An ovarian cyst, eggplant-sized, the doctors said, with an ovarian torsion that was on the verge of rupturing. If she had stayed on trail, if she had tried to sleep it off, if those 2 strangers had made a different choice, the outcome could have been catastrophic. Within 30 minutes of getting the diagnosis, Kelly was on the operating table. The surgery removed her left ovary entirely. Her dad flew in the next morning. She spent the night in the hospital, and over the next couple of days recovered just enough to be cleared for travel. She was wheeled through the airport in a wheelchair, heading home to Conway, Arkansas, 6 days into a hike she had spent over a year preparing for. That image says a lot about where Kelly Hayes was in April 2021. And what she did next says even more about who she is. 3 weeks. She took 3 weeks off the trail to recover from the removal of an organ. 3 weeks after major abdominal surgery, before she laced her boots back up. Most medical professionals would tell you that recovery from this type of surgery typically requires 4 to 6 weeks of rest, with a gradual return to light activity. Kelly was back hiking at full effort in 3 weeks. Not because she was reckless, she wanted to get back to her trail family. She returned on May 7th, picking the trail back up at Max Patch in North Carolina, skipping approximately 200 miles of the southern section so she could stay on a realistic timeline to summit Mount Katahdin before the season ended. That first week back was rough. Her body was still healing. The physical demands of long-distance hiking don't pause for recovery. The elevation, the miles, the weight on her back, she pushed through all of it. Day by day, week by week, the miles accumulated. Kelly's trail family, her group of hiking companions, became one of the defining features of her AT experience. Grace and Stephanie were among the closest of those bonds, the kind of friendships that only form when you're sharing the most physically demanding experience of your life with someone, miles from anywhere, relying on each other in ways that are hard to explain once you're back in the real world. On October 14, 2021, Kelly Hayes summited Mount Katahdin, the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. For most thru hikers, that moment is the finish line, the achievement, the end of a roughly 6-month journey that pushes human endurance to its limits. For Kelly, it wasn't over. She still had that 200-mile section she had skipped in the south, the one she bypassed after surgery to stay on schedule. In Kelly's mind, that was unfinished business, and unfinished business doesn't sit well with someone who once played through a serious knee injury to stay on a college basketball roster. She flew home from Maine, spent 2 weeks back in Conway getting things organized, then flew back and rejoined the trail on November 1st. She finished the remaining miles on November 16th, ending at Low Gap Shelter, the very area near where she had first woken up in agony back in April, near where it had all begun. The symmetry of that finish is something that probably hits differently when you understand the whole story. She had completed every single mile. The Appalachian Trail was done, but Kelly Hayes was just getting started. The natural next step for someone chasing the Triple Crown, the term hikers use for completing the 3 major long-distance trails in America, was the Pacific Crest Trail. 2,650 miles running through California, Oregon, and Washington, from the Mexican border all the way to Canada. Kelly set out in 2022, northbound, with the desert heat of Southern California ahead of her. She made it 350 miles before her body shut down again. Not another surgical emergency this time, illness, deep and stubborn enough to force a decision. She stepped off the PCT 350 miles in. She described it publicly as heartbreak. And that's exactly what it was. There's no trail injury to point to, no dramatic rescue story, just the grinding reality of knowing your body can't continue and having to make the call. For someone with Kelly's competitive drive, that kind of decision is its own form of suffering. But here's the thing about Kelly Hayes that the heartbreak stories actually illustrate. She isn't someone who quits because things get hard. She's someone who has learned, the hard way, to tell the difference between the difficulty that makes you stronger and the situation that will break you beyond repair. An ovary taught her that lesson. She wasn't going to ignore her body twice. She processed the PCT setback the same way she processed the basketball injury and the AT surgery, by redirecting the energy forward rather than collapsing under it. She talked about it openly on her channel. She didn't disappear, didn't stop posting, didn't pretend it hadn't happened. She owned it and kept moving. And moving meant the Florida Trail in 2023. The Florida Trail doesn't have the same cultural cachet as the AT or the PCT. It doesn't show up in the same gear ads or magazine covers, but anyone who has actually done it will tell you it's one of the most underrated and punishing long-distance hikes in the country. Swamps, alligators, flat terrain that somehow still destroys your legs, and heat that is genuinely relentless. Kelly documented every mile of it, and in her own words, the videos she produced inspired other hikers to take a second look at a trail that often gets dismissed. She also completed the Pinhoti Trail in 2023, a 440-mile route running through Alabama and Georgia that most people outside the thru-hiking community have never heard of. By the end of 2023, Kelly's trail resume was stacking up in a way that very few hikers ever achieve. Then came 2024, and the biggest challenge she had taken on yet: the Continental Divide Trail. 3,100 miles from the Mexican border in New Mexico, all the way to the Canadian border in Montana, traversing the Rocky Mountains through 5 states: New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. The CDT is widely considered the most remote and demanding of the 3 Triple Crown trails. The trail is less developed, the navigation is harder, the weather can turn deadly with almost no warning, and the stretches of genuine isolation make the AT look like a busy commute. Kelly thru-hiked the entire Continental Divide Trail in 2024. 5 months. Every single day documented on YouTube. The range of terrain she covered: high alpine passes in Colorado, the desert expanse of New Mexico, the wild and exposed ridgelines of Montana, is the kind of thing that takes years off your body even when everything goes right. She completed it. And in doing so, she joined a very small group of people who have finished all 3 of the Triple Crown trails: the Appalachian, the Pacific Crest, and the Continental Divide. As of the end of 2025, fewer than 900 people in recorded history have ever been officially designated Triple Crown completers by the American Long Distance Hiking Association. The total number of people who have ever lived in Conway, Arkansas alone is larger than that. From a teenager playing D1 basketball at the University of Central Arkansas to one of fewer than 1,000 people in history to complete America's hiking Triple Crown. That's a sentence that doesn't happen without the knee injury, without the surgery, without the PCT heartbreak, without all of it. The numbers tell their own story, but they don't tell the full one. Kelly's YouTube channel, launched quietly on January 3, 2020, has accumulated over 155,000 subscribers and more than 20 million total views. She posts daily content during her hikes, not edited highlights, but actual day-by-day documentation of what it takes to be out there. The production quality isn't the draw, the authenticity is. Viewers follow because they feel like they are actually on the trail with her. Beyond YouTube, she runs a Patreon community where subscribers get behind-the-scenes access, early video releases, bonus content, and access to the nutrition ebook she developed called 9 Lives, a name that, when you know the story, feels entirely earned. She's appeared on Cameo, done sponsored content with outdoor gear companies, and maintains an active presence across Instagram and TikTok. Estimated yearly earnings from her various income streams land somewhere between $96,000 and $144,000 annually, with an estimated net worth approaching $700,000 as of 2025. For someone who, not that many years ago, was a registered dietitian wondering whether the 9-to-5 life was going to be enough, those numbers represent something beyond just financial success. They represent a complete reinvention. The van, the trails, the camera. None of it was planned from the beginning. None of it followed a traditional content creation playbook. It grew organically out of a woman who just kept showing up, kept posting through the hard parts, kept being honest about the failures alongside the wins. She still lives the split existence that works for her: part-time van life, part-time cabin life, full-time hiker. She's talked about future adventures, keeping a level of mystery around what's coming next. The Instagram bio says it plainly: Full-time hiker trash. She means it. Here's the thing about the title of this video that's worth sitting with for a moment. The untold story of Kelly Hayes isn't some hidden scandal or controversy. It isn't a secret life nobody knew about. The untold part is simpler than that, and in some ways harder to absorb. It's the image of a 28-year-old woman being wheeled through an airport in a wheelchair, heading home to Arkansas after having an ovary removed, with a 2,000-mile trail she hadn't started sitting out there waiting for her. It's the moment she hung up basketball, the thing she had identified with her entire life, and had to figure out who she was without it. It's 350 miles into the PCT, body breaking down, making the call to step off a trail she had been dreaming about, and having to live with that. None of those moments make great thumbnails. None of them go viral on their own. They're the parts of the story that exist in between the summits, but they're also the entire reason the summits mean anything. When Kelly Hayes finished the Continental Divide Trail in 2024, joining fewer than 900 people in history to complete the Triple Crown, it wasn't a moment that arrived in spite of everything that had gone wrong. It arrived because of it. Every setback had recalibrated something. Every forced stop had taught her something the trail couldn't. The surgeon who removed that ovary in 2021 probably had no idea he was part of the story of a future Triple Crown hiker. The version of Kelly Hayes who got wheeled through that airport had no idea what was coming either. And that might be the most interesting thing about this whole story. Not the miles, not the views, not the subscriber count. It's the fact that none of it was inevitable. At every turn, there was a version of this where she stopped, where the injury stuck, where the surgery became the reason, where the PCT heartbreak became the exit. She just kept deciding not to stop. That's the untold story.